Yo, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest joining us today. I'm excited to be talking to Sarah Lent. Now, some of you guys are like, who is Sarah Lent? Why are you talking to her? Is she important or something like that? Well, let me tell you. So Sarah is a coworker of mine. She's someone who spent a decent amount of time in the IBF church, right? Independent Fundamental Baptist Church, that extreme denomination of Christianity. And so I wanted her to come on this channel and share her story, her experience with this group, right? With this extreme legalistic denomination. So Sarah, thank you for coming on. I'm excited to have you.
Hey, Terry.
How you been?
I'm fine.
Listen, I'm super excited to talk to you. I want to hear your story. For everybody who knows anything about me, they know that I love to talk theology. I love to talk to people from other religions that converted to Christianity. I like to talk to people who were Christians and they converted to something else. I love to hear people's experience and their backstories and the reasoning behind it and how God moved in their life. So I'm super intrigued by your story, as you know, as I shared with you. And but before we get into that, just introduce yourself to the viewers and those who may or may not watch this video, and let them know who you are.
Great. Thanks, Terry. My name is Sarah, and I am not a native to Chicago. I've only lived here for about 2.5 years. I was born in a town about 45 minutes northeast of Philadelphia, and that's where I grew up. I went to college out of state, and so I actually haven't lived at home since I was 18. And I ended up with a minor in theology. I studied at 2 different Christian colleges, pursuing a degree in music. And then theology was required for everyone at both institutions as either a major or a minor. And so, I was a teacher in Colorado for almost a decade before I moved here, in the middle of the first shutdown of COVID. And so I'm still getting my feet under me for Chicago, but we're going to get ready for winter here, and it's my 3rd winter, and you only ever have to have one first Chicago winter. And so I'm really grateful that I at least know what to expect with winter coming. So
Yep. It's funny that you said that. In trucking, they take the 1 year or the 4 months, however many months you want to count it, as a Chicago winter or winter in the Midwest as 1 year of experience. So if you've been through one winter as a truck driver, then you have a year of experience, because that's how crazy winters can be here in Chicago and the Midwest. But and some of you guys are probably wondering, like, who's Sarah? Why does Derry have her on the show? Why is she here? I didn't fully explain what we're going to be talking about today. But Sarah is a coworker of mine. She works for Grip, and that's how we met. And as I got to know her and just heard her story, I really wanted to talk about it, right? I've never met anyone that comes from her background or the denomination that she's came from. And so it's very intriguing for me to just want to talk about it. And I think that it's powerful. I think it's inspiring and motivating. And I think that we can give God glory for what he did in her story. And so without further ado, we're going to get into this thing. And I just want you to share, like, your childhood growing up, and what that was like for you.
Yeah. I'm really grateful that both my parents loved Jesus, and I was in church from the earliest that I can remember. I think that there's something really profound in having a mom and a dad in the home, and a mom and a dad in the home that love Jesus. I was raised for the first 10 years of my life in a non-denominational evangelical setting. So definitely heard the gospel, had some understanding that I was a sinner. I knew that sin meant that I had done something wrong. But from an early age, I also was a master manipulator. I knew that if I brought up Jesus at bedtime, I could extend how long I could stay awake. And I remember very clearly when I was 3, it was summertime, it was still daylight outside, and my mom said, it's time for bed. And I distinctly remember thinking to myself, if I talk about Jesus, I don't have to go to bed yet. And I made up some full story that I asked Jesus into my heart that day. And that put everything full stop with bedtime routines, because my parents wanted to like press into this, because this was very exciting, because that's like a Christian parent's dream to hear that like their child is like given their life to Jesus. And I had already been in church long enough to know the lingo, and I had picked up on that. And so they, for all intents and purposes, like fully believed that I had like said a prayer in my bedroom earlier that day on my own, and that I was a follower of Jesus. And so the next step, naturally, if you're in the Christian faith, is baptism. And so by the time I was in first grade, I had been baptized, and I had like told the same story that when I was 3, I had asked Jesus into my heart. And there's a lot of troubling things with that phrase. If you're like not in Christian circles, you're like, what the heck? And I'm in Christian circles and I'm like, what the heck? Because it's just not, it doesn't, I don't feel like it imparts like an actual picture of what salvation is if you instruct a child to pray, to ask Jesus into your heart without any like greater context in scripture. I think it's like really troublesome, but regardless, got baptized on a lie that I told when I was 3, and really struggled with doubt and just this nagging belief that I didn't have.
Hold on, I'm sorry. Where are you from originally?
Oh, Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. Okay.
Yes. So Pennsylvania is a very wide state. It takes about 8 hours to drive across, and I'm in the like northeast part of Philadelphia, which is in the southern corner of the state. So I'm about an hour and a half south of Manhattan by train, and about an hour and a half west of the Atlantic Ocean. So.
Wow. Okay. Cool. Cool.
Yes. So later on, like probably when I was 17, I came to a breaking point where I acknowledged that it was actually my sin, in spite of how good I was. I was like a very well-behaved, rule-following church kid by that point. Came to the realization that that wasn't enough to save me. Like God didn't give me more brownie points because I followed the rules. Because between my pretend acknowledgement of an understanding of salvation and the actual point, there was a lot of change in my family, and my dad made the decision to move our church move my family out of a non-denominational setting into the independent fundamental Baptist circle. And so I've lived in 5 states at this point, and I will tell you that like Midwest conservative Christianity and Colorado conservative Christianity and Pennsylvania conservative Christianity all has like a very different vibe. And the conservative sect that I was in was very, very rule focused. My mom jumped in with the worship ministry pretty soon after we became Baptist, and a woman heard my mother singing a Michael W. Smith song. So this is like mid 90s, and actually like turned her into the pastor for singing a song that had too much rhythm. And my mom was basically censored. And so from then on, my mom and I pretty much stopped wearing pants. We became King James only. We got rid of all of our like contemporary music.
Because I wanna get into that. But why do you think that it's different? Like I've never heard anybody say that. Like conservative, there's a difference between like Midwest, Eastern, and then Western Christians or conservatives. Why do you think it's different?
I think there's probably a lot of things at play, but so Denver, where I lived from 2010 to 2020, is very transient, a lot like Chicago. And so you're getting people from all over the place that are bringing their like flavors of conservatism into the city. And so I think that you take that with like everybody having like a love of the great outdoors, and how does that play into your faith? And so the way it's practiced is very different. And then I think Midwest is closer to East Coast conservative Christianity, and that like our roots run really deep. And it's a little bit like, especially with all the small towns, it's a little bit less transient. And I think that people are just raised to think a certain way, just like there's definitely a Chicago dialect for people that have been raised here. There's just a certain timbre to your voice. And the same with the way we practice the rule following side of Christianity. I think there's just this communal aspect of a lingo that we all use that is like very familiar.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. I'm gonna do some further investigation into that, because yeah, I've never heard that before. So that just got my mind wandering to a whole bunch of things. So so how old are you at this point?
I'm almost 37. I'll be 37.
No, not your age now.
Oh, I was like,
in the story. No, in the story.
Like, I don't know how we skipped all that. So anyway, so we became Baptists when I was 11. So I was in 5th grade.
Okay.
Man, middle school is rough across the board. I don't really care if you like know Jesus or not. Middle school is so hard. There's like, your body is changing and you feel super self-conscious, and you're having to like make new friends in middle school. And so like we changed churches, and I started attending the school that was attached to the church I was going to. And most of those kids had actually been together since kindergarten. And so I was definitely like the oddball. I started there in 7th grade. So I was almost 13. And again, that's just like such a crazy time of so many transitions. So to also like be the new person in a very small, cliquey type school is like really hard. But it's also really formative. So all of the new things I was learning in youth group and absorbing in Christian camp during the summer, and, you know, winter retreats, going away to the mountains in Pennsylvania to like hear about Jesus. And I was introduced to a whole new set of vocabulary about modesty and purity culture. We for sure didn't call it purity culture, but we all knew that there were like subjects that were like taboo that we were not allowed to talk about amongst ourselves. Censorship between guy and girl conversations. Talked a lot about.
So this podcast will not be happening.
No, for sure it would not. And I learned that really fast, that like if I had questions for like my youth pastor or like any youth leader, like someone else had to be present when I asked the questions, or like the office door was never fully closed. And I do believe that there's like safe parameters, especially with like how much abuse has been uncovered in the church recently. And I think that some structures are okay, but my blame or my finger pointing is that it was very one-sided. It was very much one gender's fault for any struggles within the church. Later on, I was
so if a guy fell into lust, it was because the girl's jeans were too tight.
We didn't wear jeans. What are you talking about?
No. Oh, her ankle was too shiny. her calf muscle was showing too much.
Ankles, elbows, shoulders. We had like I think it was like a three finger, and a forefinger in the back as to like how much skin could be exposed. Yeah.
That is so just toxic. I mean, I've experienced purity culture even in evangelical circles, probably we're almost the same age, so probably around the same time that you were going through your thing. But I've experienced it firsthand, where the woman's body is always shamed. It's almost like as if the woman's body is sin.
Yeah.
100%. We need to make sure that we put all the garbage bags over these women, so these dudes can't practice self-control, but
yeah,
we won't want them to fall into sin. So it's more so of, like you said, the woman's fault, and then not holding the man accountable, not challenging them not, setting the standard like, hey, you need to practice some self-control and you need to
Mhm.
change your mindset and your thought process, or even the thing that you might be looking at on TV, or maybe even some of the music that you're listening to that's causing you to think these thoughts. So that's a very toxic view of things. I'm definitely trying to protect my daughters from that. I have three daughters, and two little boys, and I'm raising my boys up to understand, like, hey, women's body isn't bad. Like, we don't. They're all different shapes and sizes and all those different things. And teaching them how to respect women, how to approach women, the thought process behind women's bodies. Like, my son is 8; he's watching his 13-year-old sister. Her body's changing, she's changing, and she's really like the standoffish. Like, she's running into the bathroom to change clothes and things like that. So him understanding, like, you can't play or like punch your sister in certain places because she's a young woman.
Yeah.
Having to teach him that. So yeah, it's tough conversations, but there's a lot of conversations that definitely need to be needed. And yeah, so
Yeah. I mean, and I think even like this far removed from those circles, I have to think that like nobody in those circles in leadership set out to shame women like consciously. I have to believe that there's like something in them that was like, we're going to protect, but they went to the nth degree. They went so far past what was reasonable or helpful. I don't think that it was good shepherding. Like, they
yeah,
may have had good intentions, but I think that the idea of shepherding the flock as a whole, and not just like demoralizing one gender for the sake of protecting the other, like it doesn't work.
yeah,
I can think of honestly a girl I grew up with got pregnant in high school because it happens, right? Like, even in the most protected circles. And I feel like it's something I've had to repent of and like talk through. I was in the circle of like girls that like condemned her, of just like, oh, you failed in this like major way by getting pregnant out of wedlock. And
making them feel like their life is just over. It's just like, you're the
yeah,
scum of the earth.
yeah. And I think that part of that was like, there was for sure no sense of grace or hope taught
Hmm.
when we would have our purity circles. Like, there were just again and again, there's like a whole host of examples that I have heard over the years that are all equally as terrible for why you should stay pure outside of marriage. But the one that sticks out that was just so vengeful was my youth pastor's wife took a teacup that she had bought at Goodwill, and she bought a set of two, and she smashed one on the floor as a like demonstration in one of our like girls only youth group days. And then the second cup she had smashed at home and then like painstakingly glued together and then like tucked in a Ziploc bag. And she held that one up after she smashed the other one in front of us. And she was like, like, if you choose to do something outside of marriage, look at all the cracks. Like, even if God heals you, you will never be as useful or as beautiful as you were before you chose to sin. And I was 16.
Wow.
So like, forget an understanding of what it means to fall before a righteous God and like realize what a gift salvation is and want to serve out of a heart of gratitude. I
Hmm.
lived into my mid-20s fully afraid of being such a profound disappointment to God that I wouldn't be able to be used anymore. So that was my motivation, not to talk to boys and not to go on dates and not to listen to music with a beat and not to wear pants and all these things. None of it had anything to do with having a heart or a posture that wanted to serve and honor my Lord. It was solely based on the fact that I didn't want to disappoint him. And so maybe that's holy fear, maybe that's holy reverence, but it for sure wasn't from a headspace of understanding salvation or grace. And at the end of it, it actually led into like a really toxic part of my college career where I was an assistant hall leader. And part of my job was to enforce dress code with the girls that lived on my hall. And I ruled with an iron fist, and I was like so unkind. And I distinctly remember the number of times that it came out of my mouth, like, you clearly don't love God because today I saw your knees.
Like, before we continue on into college, how did you feel? I want to backtrack a little bit. How did you feel when you went from one church to this kind of extreme denomination as a kid? How do you think did that affect you? You moved from one city, going to a whole different style of church. How did that affect you?
I think like in some ways I saw my mom have to suddenly follow the same rules. And I was like, okay, this is what we're doing. When you're in it, it doesn't feel as severe as being this side looking back. Because my parents said, we may not have always had these rules, but these are the rules that the church says we need to follow. And we believe that they are following scripture. And this is what we're going to do as a family.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's hard to reach back into 11-year-old Sarah's brain. I think I was more concerned that like biggest issue for me was changing schools, because I was already, I had braces and, glasses were not cool then. And, it just.
Funny how things change, don't it? Like now everybody wearing glasses even when they don't need to.
Truth. Like I already didn't really fit in with people my own age. And so I think I was like consumed with like wanting to fit in. And when I found that teachers and adults really liked me and praised me for following the rules, I was like, okay, I'm here. Did
you listen to like rhythm music before you came to IFB? No. Okay.
No, I started playing piano when I was 5, and the piano teachers I had were classically trained. And so even to this day, like my background is very classical. So Bach and Beethoven and Mozart. So if I was listening to anything, it was that. But
I definitely wouldn't have made it in those circles. I would have not. I would have been like, what? Like I struggled as a Christian's kid. My mom didn't let me listen to secular music. I could listen to, music that had beats and stuff like that, but it had to be like Christian. The most secular thing that we would have considered secular at that time was Kurt Franklin.
Oh my God.
And that's just because his music had like hip hop beats to it and stuff like that. He was singing like gospel. And mom, that was like the only thing that I was allowed to listen to. But when I got with my dad, it was like, everything that was bad for me. So it was DMX, it was Tupac, it was Nas, Biggie, it was all those things. So transitioning into like a super strict church that says, "Oh, you can't listen to something like that," I'd have just probably passed out or something, ran away, because that was not.
I didn't even know that Tupac was an artist until I was 24. It was my first teaching job out of college, and I was in like the hood, and clearly because like also just raised in a very white part of Pennsylvania, just like not a lot of variety in any way. And so yes, my very first class of 8th graders introduced me to Tupac. So
nice. Now, how did they introduce you to Tupac? Like, did they play the song, or did they?
I was in like the armpit of Denver public schools, like the worst part of the district. And like, I didn't know that when I took the job. I was so excited for my first teaching job out of college. And when I told people what part of the district I was teaching in, every single person was like, "Oh, we'll pray for you." Like I didn't know, but I took the job, and the school was overpopulated. Like the building capacity was 750, and the year I taught there, they were at 925, and the classroom ratios were out of whack. And so here I am, little white girl in the hood teaching. I had almost 40 kids for a 45-minute music period and no assistant. So it was like how to keep them from killing each other. And so it was like, pick your favorite artist and write me 3 paragraphs. And then we went to the computer lab and we wrote. So did we do any music? Yes, we did. But they were like, well, I'm going to write on Tupac. And I was like, is that a real word? Like what? So just like, yeah.
It's so funny.
24-year-old Sarah had a lot to learn. So yeah.
Definitely. All right. So college, you ruled with an iron fist as a hall monitor?
I was an assistant hall monitor.
Hall monitor.
But so
why do you need 2 hall monitors? I guess that's a question that I need to ask the school. But
because girls need to keep it. We need to keep those women in line. So
did the boys have a hall monitor?
Yes, but they didn't enforce the rules quite as strictly on boys' side of campus.
That's terrible.
So, at this point, like getting to college, my parents attended a parenting seminar for high schoolers at the church I was attending. And they said, if you have daughters, we would recommend these 4 colleges. And because at the end of it, my job as a good Baptist girl, I can go to college and like exercise my brain a little bit, but really my end goal should be to be a wife and mother. And so they recommended 4 Bible colleges, 2 down south and 2 in the Midwest. My parents, God love them. I'm so grateful for this. They looked at the list and they eliminated 2 of them. And they said, those schools are not accredited. And if you ever have any desire to go to a state school, you need something that can transfer credits. And so that left 2 colleges on the list because they had said, they were like, we would prefer you to get your whole education in a Christian college. But we understand that you might transfer. Which really went against the grain of what a lot of my friends' parents said. And so I'm grateful that maybe in their own way, they were seeing just some of the cracks in the system. So anyway, so I picked a fundamental Baptist college in Wisconsin, about 80 miles north of Chicago, in a tiny little town. And I was a music major with a Bible minor. And
what's the name of that town? Because I'm probably drove through there as a truck driver.
Yeah, it's called Watertown near Johnson's Creek, Wisconsin. So yeah,
I've been through Watertown.
So sorry. So probably seen a bunch of.
I don't think I've ever stopped in there, but I've definitely rode through there.
Yeah. So I mean, like, I got fairly decent grades and did what I was supposed to do. Was like looking for a husband because, you know, you have to like keep your eye out because you never know.
Do they instruct you to like look for a husband? And how do you go about looking for a husband?
18-year-old Sarah had some issues. I don't remember. I just was like, it was like on my radar that like my goal is to get married and serve Jesus. At that point, I was going to go be a missionary. And I figured that if I knew how to teach piano, I could stay home with my kids and teach piano and have my own like ministry while my husband was off in the bush because I don't know, I was going to go to Africa or something. Yeah. So in the midst of that, so just some like, I tell people some of the rules we had to follow. And if you're not from these circles, you're going to think that I've lost my mind. So we were allowed to wear pants in the winter once it got to -10. So 0 was not cold enough, but some boneheaded human in the administration decided that -10 was cold enough. But here are the regulations for pants. No denim, because like denim is sin. I don't know. Girls and pants. And
I didn't even hear about like denim in the book of Leviticus, like as a fabric that you couldn't wear, but you keep going.
Probably like mixed fiber or like too many seams. It's a whole thing. So we, at the beginning of the semester, could bring our like dress slacks or trousers to our resident supervisor. And we all had like a slot and we would try on the pants for her. We would turn around, we would squat, we would demonstrate whether or not it showed anything it shouldn't. She would mark the brand and the size in a notebook and mark them approved or not approved, so that come colder weather or the very rare opportunity that we had to wear pants off campus, if someone, usually a man, were to see us and were to say, like, this is before Target was like really popular. So there was a Walmart in town and we would like go hang out at Walmart. And if someone said, oh my gosh, I saw Sarah and she was wearing navy blue pants and they were a stumbling block and I just need you to talk to her, I would have to pull my navy pants and put them on for the resident supervisor, and she would reevaluate. And like, perhaps I had gained weight or my weight had shifted and like suddenly they were not modest anymore, they would be banned. And they would either be confiscated or I would have to like send them home because I couldn't wear them anymore.
This is like body shaming before it became a thing. Like
it was totally body shaming. And I mean, like,
you couldn't be like, so I gotta ask this question. Is there a certain body type that they would tell women that they had to be? Like you couldn't?
I know that my friends who had more curves to speak of than I will ever have in a day in my life were constantly censored and through no fault of their own. So like, for anybody watching, I am 5'1" and I'm 95 pounds and I have been a size 0 for like all of my life. And to know that we were just constantly being watched, just constantly being checked, for lack of a better term, and like, not to be crass, but we were being checked out by women staff members, and male staff like would avert their gaze or they would like send a female staff member after us. And like, I just think that so much of this culture perpetuates this idea that women are a sexual commodity, and it's body shaming. It asks us not to be comfortable in our own skin because we're constantly second guessing. I remember even just, I really wanted to get like a good pair of what I would just consider like dress, like leather knee-high boots to like go under my skirts, because I had like ankle-length skirts at this point, and like we were allowed to wear tights, but then like you don't want to wear like a pair of ballet flats in the snow. That's like absolutely absurd, but you still want to like
right.
together. But there was even this stigma of we had like a nickname for those boots that was like definitely not appropriate. Like, I won't say what we called them, but it was a phrase that we said in like hushed whispers, pointing to the fact that like only a certain type of women actually wore those boots. And so we would like try them on secretly in a shoe store and then like not buy them because like we didn't want to be one of those girls. I had a girl later on, like my junior year, who pulled me aside, who like didn't even have any pants to her name, like even for when it was cold. And she said, Sarah, I've been so burdened to talk to you. I just feel like you are going to send people to hell. And I was like, whoa. And she said, I have, been reading in the Bible when it talks about how women should present themselves modestly and appropriately covered. And she said, I just think that like God will not bless your witness if you try to share the gospel while wearing pants. Because I had joined this ministry that went to one of the state schools campuses on Friday nights in the winter, and like tried to talk to students that were like going to hang out and do very normal college things and like tell them about Jesus. And like, if it was sub-zero weather, we were allowed to wear pants for this ministry. And she was like, I just think that like God is going to look at the people that are hearing the gospel through you. And because you're wearing pants, he will not allow them to hear the true message of salvation. And it was right because about that.
I couldn't be in these circles. Like especially back then, I didn't have a filter back then. So I definitely wouldn't have survived in these circles. I would have been like exiled to the farthest city
like,
ever. But I like that is crazy. Like, so Jesus not gonna talk like he's not gonna allow this person to be saved because
Yeah.
I got on some pants.
Yep.
That when you say it out loud, like when these people hear that come out of their mouths and say it out loud and hear it, because it makes like zero sense, especially when you've read the Bible. So that
Yeah.
just blows my mind.
So, I mean, that was like one of the first things that sat very unwell in my spirit. And I was like, what am I doing? It just started very slow. I am a slow learner. That was the very beginning of me starting to listen and to hear the things that we were perpetuating, the things that we were teaching, and maybe to begin to think like, I don't know that this is what scripture actually says.
How much of scripture had you read at this point? Like on your own?
Yeah. In the theology classes that I was taking, I was required to read like huge chunks as like part of my grade every semester. So by that point, I had probably read the entirety of scripture as far as like scanning chapters and verses and marking it off as read. But did I have like a vibrant in the word every day relationship? Probably not.
Got you. Do you think that is even to this day like an issue in the independent fundamentalist Baptist? It's a lot to say.
I know.
Church.
Like a hot.
Yeah, independent fundamental Baptist, correct? That's how you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so my parents still attend the church I was brought up in, and women can wear pants on Sundays now. And
That's a celebration right there. Like,
it is a celebration. I mean, like I was part of that church business meeting when they voted to allow women to speak in meetings and wear pants, and people got up and walked out. So, I mean, we're talking like it's only been within the last 15 years that church has allowed women to ask questions during business meetings or wear pants. So to some extent that's progress, but I think and the therapist I've worked with will attest to this, that I have like a very overworked sense of justice. Like I want them to acknowledge that for the first 40 years that the church existed, they actually did a lot of profound damage to generations of women. And I'm not negating that men were also affected by this, but I speak from my perspective, right? And the fact that like there was definitely a thumb put on my gender from a very early age, and I think that that's really dangerous. And
I think some of these things, as I've been like researching more about this church, like it's woven into like so many other areas of the church, nationalism, and like I've listened to like a couple of sermons over the last couple of days, and I was like, whoa.
It's profoundly dangerous. It's really dangerous.
Even though I think I'm assuming is real famous. I can't remember the guy's name. I should have probably wrote his name down, but he like smashed the TV because the TV is the devil and Satan's using that to brainwash everybody and blah blah blah. He literally smashed a TV and on stage during his sermon. I was like, and it's just a whole lot of you devils this and this, like, yo, like, whoa. I mean, very, very entertaining for me, but like I was laughing for about 90% of the sermon, but I'm like, yo, all right, what's the message?
Yeah.
Where's the man? How do I apply these things to my life? Like, how do I grow in my relationship with Jesus? Is the questions that I was left with as I was watching those. So, but and it's like that's your experience, like those type of sermons.
Yes, a lot of shouting, a lot of screaming, and a lot of so I think when Facebook was new, so what, 2007, probably maybe 2010 or 2011, all of our moms started getting Facebook, and that was really weird. And I think it was like to keep tabs on us. But in the midst of that, there was a pastor at the church I grew up in who was caught having an affair with a woman in the church. And he was like applauded off the stage to go to counseling, and she was publicly removed from the church. And so it was like this profoundly, it was just a double standard that really like
reminds me when the woman was caught having adultery and they wanted to stone her, but you don't hear about anything with the men.
Yes. Like, she was definitely like not kept safe or taken care of. And especially like he was in leadership, like he should have been held to a higher standard.
Exactly.
Like if God calls you to shepherd the body, like you don't get a free pass to go to counseling when you break up a marriage by having an affair. It takes two of you. Right. But it was in that, it was another piece of the breakup that I was having with the fundamentalist movement, because my mom was Facebook friends with the pastor's wife and the woman he had an affair with. And the pastor's wife, yes, she was like hurt. And this is one of my
Hey, what's up?
I had a feeling like she was going to make an appearance.
It was at first I couldn't see the face, so I was just like, "What is that dark shadow over her?"
She just she's just like got to be present. So the pastor's wife made a list of like their shared friends and emailed all of the women that had that other woman as a friend and was like, "You have to pick sides. You can be my friend or you can be her friend." And my mom picked the pastor's wife. And I love my mom, and I feel like I am very independent and have like a lot of strengths because of who she is. But that absolutely crushed my spirit. And I was like, but who is looking out for this woman? Like, there's no protection. There's no grace being offered. And so that was another that I was like, there's something fundamentally wrong if in a church denomination, when sin happens, not if, right? We can like be here and acknowledge that sin happens. It's not if or something to be hidden.
Not if, but when.
Exactly. Like Jesus came to shed light on the fact that we are sinners and we can't get it together. Like, but that means extending grace and understanding what it looks like for reconciliation for all parties involved, and not just one because his gender is the winner in society. Like he won the genetic lottery because he's a white heterosexual male who is a Baptist preacher. Like that's absurd. So
in those communities, right, I've been watching these little documentaries, and I'm watching one on Peacock, and it's called Front of the Family. And the dude was crazy, but I think they were like Mormons. Is that denomination, like when you live in a community, is everybody like part of that church for the most part? Or
I mean,
is it
there were like several Baptist churches where I grew up, and then I had neighbors who were Mennonites, so not quite Amish. They did drive cars and have some technology, but they had bonnets and like head coverings for the women, and separate entrances in their church for each gender. And so they were my friends. We were in a library club together. So like learned
library club.
Yes.
We'll talk about that at work.
I mean, come on.
That's funny. But I was just curious to how the neighborhood dynamic was for this denomination, which is pretty fairly young, but it has it's like super popular. And the more I see it, the more I see these like teachings and these real extreme messages flash across Facebook or YouTube or whatever. You can see how destructive it can be. And so you are in college, you're the assistant hall monitor, you got confronted by a young lady because of your pants, right?
Yeah. Well, because I wore pants to share the gospel in winter.
Right. And you wouldn't be able to share the gospel in the winter. That person wouldn't be saved because you have pants on.
Yep.
What part of college is this?
Probably the winter semester. So January, February of 2007.
Okay. I graduated out of high school. So.
Thanks, Derry. Needed that perspective.
Maybe like 2 years.
I know. It just like feels like so long ago.
I know.
I mean, like,
I already
also
have my high school reunion, 10-year reunion and
yeah.
15-year reunion. And I'm like, yo, I ain't going to the 20. So yeah, just
I know.
miss it.
I've been processing some applications for some of our volunteers at work, and they're like 1997 date of birth, and I'm like 2001 date of birth, and I'm like, great. So
don't feel bad. I feel it too, but it's all good. So you graduate. What'd you study again in college?
So at that point, I was like a piano major, music.
Okay.
I was a music major with a piano emphasis, and I was a theology minor.
Okay, theology minor. Cool. Did you graduate? Did you want to actually use your degrees? A theology degree?
Well, the theology degree was required, and I fully believed that it was going to help me be a really good Christian. So the summer between my junior and senior year, I worked as a camp counselor in Pennsylvania, and I ended up getting Lyme disease and mono at the same time. So my immune system was wrecked, and God actually used that as a profound catalyst towards change. And I ended up being way too sick to finish that semester. And so I was in school for like a whole 10 days, and there was a whole host of other things that God was doing in my life. But in the process, the camp I had served at that summer had a really good ministry with inner city teenagers, getting them out of Philly and into nature and sharing the gospel. And God broke my heart for these kids, like I had never encountered, because I think growing up in a 2-parent household, we were like comfortably lower middle class. I have held down a job since I was 14, but at the same time, like my needs were met, our bills were paid. I was in private school. We went to church with people that looked like me. I went to school with people that looked like me. There wasn't diversity, and there wasn't a particular exposure to people who like didn't have half of what I had been afforded in my 21 years of life. And I was so struck by how standoffish the kids would come at the beginning of the week, because they didn't know what to expect. And like, it's like our kids here, that some of them have never been to the lakefront just for fun. And it's like such a wild experience for them, and to like give them that space. But these kids have like never been to the mountains and never been hiking and zip lining across a lake and doing a host of other things. And like to see their hearts soften, not because we had all the answers, even though like we were sharing the gospel and we believed that we had the answers for them, but just to see that like quality time was something that so many of them like didn't have a stable adult in their life. And so I had gone back to school prior to knowing that I had Lyme and mono. I was not feeling well, and they were running like a whole blood panel, but I was determined to switch my major over to education, even though that would have added 3 semesters to my college career. I just knew, I was like, God is calling me into inner city like this. Because then I guess like I left out a very like profound interaction I had that summer. So I had run into a guy that I had gone to college with for the first 2.5 years. And he and I had ended up serving as counselors together. And early on in the summer, he had pulled me aside and he was like, I don't think you're going to do very well here, Sarah. And I said, why not? Like, they tell us in college, like, give up at least one summer before you graduate to serve at a camp. Give your summer to Jesus and like see what he does. And so I was like following in obedience and following the rules and serving at a camp. And he was like, I don't think you know how to minister to people's hearts. And again, I pushed back and I said, grew up in a Christian home. I've known Jesus since I was little. I am getting a minor in theology. I memorize Bible verses. I'm serving in hall leadership. Like, I listed all my qualifications. And he was like, none of that has to do with your heart posture or the heart posture of those you're about to serve. He was like, we are about to serve kids who don't own a skirt. He was like, you're going to serve kids who have more swear words memorized than Bible verses. And what are you going to do when they don't look like you? And I didn't have an answer. And so I was really actually troubled by that, because in my whole life of following rules, no one had ever had to confront me. No one had to say, Sarah, you're not doing this well enough. So they were like, you look great. Like, all your body parts are covered and you've memorized huge chunks of scripture and you're serving in our conservative choir because you know that guitars and drums are sinful, and like, good job, good job, good job. And to have someone suddenly say, you actually don't know what it is to be a Christian, which is basically what he was saying, was so harsh. And it actually was like exactly what I needed. So God used that summer to use his words and my interactions with the teens that I was working with to really break down a lot of that legalism. And so I made the plan to switch my major. And before I got sick, I met with my academic advisor at the school in Wisconsin. And I said, I'm going to switch my major because God is calling me to teach in the public schools, because I'm going to go love these kids that like don't look like me, that need to know that Jesus loves them and he sees them. And my academic advisor said, nope, not here. He was like, we do not believe that Christians belong in the public school.
What?
So,
oh my goodness. I have a saying, me and my wife have a saying, and I'm like, I thank the Lord that he protected me from a lot of situations of people saying foolish things. Yeah, just thank you, Lord, that he kept me away from some situations, because just like I said, do people hear themselves speak when they say this stuff? Especially people with like educated, they have experience, and then to say like, yeah, God ain't called us to the public school. Like, that's just for like, it's for the devils. Like,
yeah,
that was the hell. Like, just God's love is not there. That's hell. Like, what? Like, yeah, that makes no sense anyway. That's so crazy, man. Like,
it's just like, but it's reality. And like, I have to circle back to like what I said is that like, I think that was like coming from a place of like believing that he was like protecting me or shielding me from something. And like, whether or not that needed to happen, like, I don't think he woke up and was like, man, everybody that's in public school is going to hell. Like, even though, but it was like terrible. I will acknowledge he shouldn't have said it, but I just like it.
Quick question before you continue. What's your first encounter with a Black person?
I sang in a community children's choir that was not faith-based with a bunch of kids that were not white. So from 3rd through 9th grade, I was in a mixed race choir that we toured, and that was like super fun.
Okay. Cool.
So, yeah. But
did you ask them why they were wearing pants?
No.
Like the girls?
Because like I knew that like not everybody went to our church. But I will my church that I grew up in, the very first Black church members that we had, we definitely clapped for them, which is so tacky. So real sorry.
Wait, when they came to the church and said they wanted to join the church, you clapped?
Yeah.
I want to know where these people were from. I want to know who these people are and where they at now.
But I mean, two of the colleges on the list that my parents were given also had a very strict no interracial dating rule up until the mid 2000s. Like probably they officially took that off their rule books 2004, 2005. So like our circles were very protective of white privilege, which is absurd and gross and like lends itself to what you've been watching, this like idea of like white nationalism, which is trash. And it's really dangerous. And it's like not Jesus did not look like me. So
Y'all heard it. Y'all heard it here live on Weird Perspective. Sarah said it. Jesus did not look like her. That's it. Argument's over. We can just shut this down.
I mean, like, quite frankly, so just quick caveat about nothing we've talked about, but my roots here literally go back to the Mayflower. Like my dad's side and my mom's side were on that boat together. So like I'm whiter than white.
Whiter than white.
So that was for fun. You know, they were like buddies on the Mayflower, and then 400 years later, their descendants got married. So that's fun. So dairy, man, it's just like,
oh man.
Anyway, so
yeah, let's keep going.
I transferred to a less conservative school where I was allowed to wear blue jeans to dinner. Could not wear it to classes, but I could wear blue jeans to dinner. Whatever. But I was a music education major. And so and I transferred to this school in Florida because they had a direct track to get believers into the public school classrooms because they had the exact opposite philosophy. They believed that Jesus-loving humans belonged in public school classrooms. And so that's what they trained us for. And I had some really good teaching experience in Florida while I lived down there while I was finishing my degree. So in the process, very long story short, I had a roommate who ended up, she was my age, but graduating on track. I was 22 taking freshman level classes because I had to make up the education core that I was missing. She graduated, she met a guy, she was going to get married. So she hired me to be her piano player at her wedding in Detroit in November of 2009. And about a month before the wedding, she called and she was like, I no longer have a venue for my wedding. And I said, what happened? And she was like, well, there's a well-known, if you're like in Detroit, there's a well-known Baptist church up there that is just like fundamental of the fundamentalists. Like everybody in our circles knew this name. And the pastor's wife ruled over all of their dress code with a true iron fist. Every bride in that church had to try on her dress in front of the pastor's wife, and the pastor's wife would determine if it was modest enough for her husband to stand in front of that bride and officiate the ceremony. Don't shake your head. This is a for real thing. So my dear friend built much like me with no curves to speak of, had a strapless dress, and it was like so pretty. And the pastor's wife said, I will not allow you to cause my husband to stumble. You cannot get married here unless you change your dress. And this was 1 month out before the ceremony.
For some shoulders?
Yeah.
I've never walked up to a woman or even thought this in my brain that your shoulders are so attractive.
You never know.
The sexiest shoulders ever. I've never said that. I've never heard any dude say that. That is crazy.
Yeah. So
that is crazy.
Yep. So she had been attending a church in Colorado where she was living and working, but her family was from this church in Detroit. So she called her pastor from Colorado and was like, here's the situation. Can you come officiate the wedding? And he's like, yeah, I don't care what your dress looks like. So we they found a venue. I flew up. I met the pastor at the rehearsal dinner, and he was like, "What are your plans for after graduation?" And I was still inundated with the like Christian circle and vocabulary enough that I was like, well, I'm just going to like wait for God to open the door and, you know, hopefully get married.
I call that Christianese.
Yeah. And again, another hard conversation that, sorry, it's like
something's happening over there. Something's going on. Probably an accident. You know, in Chicago, when it rains, people lose their mind.
People is absolutely, yeah. I live right off Lakeshore Drive, and yeah, there's like a whole host of stuff happening up there tonight. He pushed back on my response, and he was like, "So what if God never gives you a husband?" And I was like, well, that's aggressive. Like, because
what do you mean?
Exactly. Like, because I think still, you know, if you are in this extreme rule following from any length of time, and at that point I had been in the fundamentalist circles for 13 years, it's not like a breaking free right away, right? And so I knew that the correct answer was, I'm going to serve God wholeheartedly, whether or not he provides a husband. Even though in the back of my head, I was like, but surely he's going to provide a husband because I am an obedient servant. Because it was transactional. I still like wasn't getting that it wasn't any amount of rule following that was going to get God to give me what I was praying for, or that was going to win me brownie points with him. Like, that's just not the God we serve.
That's so good.
So we talked for a little bit more, and he was like, so we just started a nonprofit at my church in Colorado, and I think you would be a good fit, and I think you should apply. And so I ended up in Colorado right after graduation in May of 2010, serving at a nonprofit that provided gospel-centered childcare for low-income single moms, which is like a really specific ministry. But in the less pretty parts of Denver, there is this just decades of neglect and redlining and so many issues and so many women in poverty that just, it's so cyclical that if they were born to single, not fully educated moms, and they never knew the stability of a two-parent household, or even just like having a dad in their life, and then they're like 15, 16, and they're looking for that affection and that attention, and so they're pregnant, and then it just perpetuates this really sad cycle. And so we believed the mission statement was like, if we provide a place that is safe in the community for women to bring their children while they are getting job training or finishing their GED or learning how to get ready for an interview, we believe that we can empower them to break that cycle, get jobs, learn how to pay bills, learn how to come out of the cycles of abuse that so many of them have been in for like generations. We partnered with another faith-based foundation in Denver that literally their whole job is to provide auto care for women who can't afford it, and there aren't a lot of trustworthy mechanics. And it was they were all Christian auto repair guys who were like, we are going to gather in a parking lot on a Saturday, and we have this like mobile trailer, and we will take a look at your engine, and we'll do an oil change, and we'll rotate your tires for free, because they were like, we are the hands and feet, like loving you where you're at. And
nice.
Fell in love with the community, fell in love with the ministry, called my parents and said, God's calling me to Colorado. And they were like, okay. I don't think like, I tell them not to be surprised that I'm so independent. My mom enlisted in the United States Navy without telling my grandparents. And so I'm like, well, at least I didn't do that. So it's okay. So in the midst of that, I joined the church out there, served faithfully in church worship, and continued working with that ministry while I ended up transferring my teaching license, and I taught in the public schools there. And when I was around 20,
what kind of church was this?
it was an Acts 29 church plant.
Okay.
So Acts 29 out of Texas. And so
I've heard of that.
we sang in 3 languages on Sundays. We sang in Swahili, we sang in Spanish, and we sang in English because we had a big group of African refugees that spoke Swahili, and they graciously taught us, and we learned to worship that way. And we had a big ministry with undocumented immigrants from like Central America and Mexico. And so we believed in having a church service that reflected all of the bodies that were present instead of forcing our non-white brothers and sisters into the white church mold. We were like, why not meet them where they're at? And we could be uncomfortable and learn to speak and sing in more than English.
Cool. How long did that take you guys to learn their language?
It was like rough, but we had, a few 3 or 4 songs in each language that we knew very, very well. So,
how was that for you, singing in a different language?
Uncomfortable
with rhythm.
Well, it was like culturally appropriate. So, yeah. So probably when I was, I think when I was 29, it was like a really dark season. I was coming to terms with, there were some leadership changes in the church that I had been attending that were, there's just like, again, a lack of shepherding as the leadership was changing. They just had too many balls in the air to juggle the shepherding of folks. And I had gone for probably like more than a year, serving every single Sunday. Couldn't tell you where my Bible was, didn't open my Bible, had fallen like out of the legalism of dress code and a certain Bible version and what music I listened to, and into this like new kind of legalism where I still was showing up and doing the Jesus thing without any relationship behind it, but believing that like God was still okay with me because I was showing up. But I was pouring out of empty. I was just like, I was a mess. And I really contemplated suicide during my 29th year of life. There was a pond near my apartment, and I drove to the pond on a very cold day in January, shortly after I turned 29, and made a very methodical list of all the ways that I could end my life, and set the list aside. And for whatever reason, I fully believe it was an intervention of the Spirit. I looked back at the list and like immediately like thought of reasons why each way would not work. Drove away from the pond, picked up a book I had found at a book sale that was called My Year with the Oxford English Dictionary. Not a faith-based book, not a Christian book. Have no clue what the author believes. Just he had been hired by a publishing company to spend 1 year reading the 1697 edition of the Oxford English Dictionary and make a case for reintroducing old words that have been removed from the dictionary back into the English language. I love words. Words are my safe space. My understanding of the English language and my love of writing and that's just where I find myself able to express. So I was like, I'm going to read a book about words that we should all use more. And I didn't make it past the A section because I read this word in the A section, apricity. So like the start of April or apricot. It was only in one edition of the Oxford English Dictionary before the editors took it out. And it means the warmth of sun in the middle of winter. And there have been very few experiences where I have felt God shouting over my life, but it was like an undeniable resonance in my head and my heart where God was like, this is actually the gospel. Jesus died, and you know this, and you've known this since you we're 3, but he actually came to expose how much you need him. He's like, your heart is that winter, that barrenness, that dry, cold, dark, nothing is growing. There's no fruit. It's just emptiness. And like Jesus shines a light. Like he is the apricity for our souls. He shines a light over that and says, that's what I'm here to fix. And like, that's the redemptive love and grace that he extends us in the gospel. He applicates. I love all the different ways you can use this word. So he applicates our hearts when we accept his free gift of salvation, right? And so I didn't take my life, and that word has just resonated in my brain. And so for my 30th birthday the following year, I actually got that word tattooed on my wrist, which is
a tattoo?
I have like 6 of them, but this is my very first one. And even, I mean, the tattoo artist, bless his dear soul, I had like done my research, and it was like super clean tattoo parlor, and they used like vegan ink, and like the ink is
vegan. I've never heard of this vegan ink.
Dairy, because some tattoo ink kills bugs, and I didn't want ink that killed bugs. I like had, it was during my vegan phase. It was a whole thing. So
yeah, we can. I mean, I don't really care about bugs, but mosquitoes don't bother me. They bother my wife. She hates all the mosquitoes, so she's like, all the mosquitoes can die. So you will not like her, because she's like, get these mosquitoes out of here.
So I got that word tattooed. The tattoo artist was like, this is not a real word. I was like, it is a real word. And let me tell you, and I honestly like feel like it's been the biggest gift to be able to tell people about how like God literally saved my life because of a word that's not even officially in the English language anymore. Because it was like such a tangible reminder and an actual meeting me of where I was at, feeling like completely washed up, and like I could not do anything more to feel like I had finally earned God's approval, and to be able to set that aside and like finally rest in the fact that like, if you look in scripture in our English translation, when Jesus died and he says, it is finished, guess what? There's a period there. It's not, it is finished, comma, now please spend the rest of your life working to prove that what I'm doing was worth it. Right? Like it doesn't say that. Like it is finished, period.
It's really amazing what you just said, your experience in that encounter with, I mean, I believe you, like as far as the Holy Spirit, just, showing you the love of Christ through this word. I think so many times a lot of people get caught up on the verse that talks about, man, Jesus died, to kill the evil deeds or the deeds of darkness or whatever. And they miss that he came for us so that we can have an experience with him. And who is him and what is he, right? He is love. And if you think about all the aspects of love, there's 5 words in the Greek for love. And if he encompasses all these words, it's like, I don't know how much love I can take, because that's a lot of different aspects of love. And if Jesus is love and he's all these things, it's like, oh my goodness. And a lot of times we get so focused up on like the devil and the thing. I mean, I can only imagine you, like your upbringing and what you're about. It was like everything was bad. It was bad, bad, bad. It was, where was the good? What was any of the love of Christ being taught to you? And so you missed out on that. And I missed out on it myself, like as a kid. It wasn't because of like, well, I guess it is because of like legalism. And my mom fell into those things, even though we didn't go to fundamental Baptist church, but we went to just a regular church. But it was a whole lot of like legalism. My mom forced me to learn scripture and all these other things, but never talked to me about the love of Christ. Right? She never told me how much Jesus loved me, and the reason why we serve him is because of his love and all these things. So, man, I think that's just really dope of how your testimony of how you came to experience that in like a season or in the moment of like, I want to take my life. Like that is, I mean, if that ain't the love of God, like, hey, you have worth. There's nothing else you can do. So that's pretty dope. That's pretty dope.
I think so too. I Yes. Never used the word dope, but I will take that, Derry. And that's pretty dope.
I'm a city boy. I can't shake it. So no matter even when I preach, I'm just like there's lingo and there's slang that comes out, and I'm just like, man, God told me to come as I am. So I'm gonna give you the context, but I mean, most people that knows me know when I say dope, I'm not talking about like dope, like
I'm tracking. I mean, I've been like in these circles for long enough. It's just like still not quite made it into my vocabulary. So
nah, it's cool. But that's amazing. I'll use that word. How's amazing?
thanks.
And so that this experience, you learned this new word that nobody ever heard or uses now. You have it tattooed on you because you're like, I'm gonna make this official.
Yes.
You get your first tattoo. What was your parents' reaction to you getting the tattoo, or how did you tell them, or how did they come to know about the tattoo?
I told them. I mean, I have like very independent relationships with my mother and with my father. Like we're like a pair and a pair. But I think my mom was just not a fan. It's just like not her jam. My dad, God has really done a work over the last, especially probably like 5 years, just really softening his heart and also like opening up his own eyes to just I like finally started telling him some of the things that like went on in youth group that I didn't know were not healthy. And he's like really disappointed in how the church like handled things. And so like he was very like receptive to it. He thought it was pretty cool. And so my dad is like my theology buddy. And the two things that we connect on are the Harry Potter series and theology, which is also bonkers with my background.
That definitely is bonkers. My wife also, she's a Harry Potter fanatic as well. Read all the seven books like multiple times in her life. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm not reading that.
Yeah, my dad and I are literally on our third read through. We're on book 6 for the third time. And we just do a couple chapters a week. And then we talk Sunday nights before our work week starts. It's like we connect on Harry Potter. And so, but I think like our parents' generation is very, this is like a lot of new, and, you know, they're not used to words like, living in authentic community or, any conversation around mental health, or even like being bold enough to say like, I thought about taking my own life. Like that's not
was the mental health conversation, was it just like, oh, it's not mental health, it's demonic, so you just need to be healed? Was it one of those you were growing up, or what kind of?
No, I think
they just like, not talk about it at all.
Most of the time we aired on that side. I think like we didn't give too much credence to anything being of a demonic nature, because that was giving Satan too much credit, which like now I'm like, hello, there's literally darkness in Chicago right now. Like you better believe. But I think it was more, oh, that's not mental health. Like you haven't been memorizing enough scripture. It was just another task. Like if you memorize scripture, you won't feel so heavy. And there's some truth, like when you're walking in community and when you are immersing yourself in the word, right. Your perspective shifts, but
being renewed, there's transforming of your mind, right?
Yes. But there's still like a legitimate, like we are still in a very dark and fallen world. And so I do believe that there are like spiritually dark, oppressive forces that like love to like grab you at your weakest moments. And so.
Yeah. Cool. Man, anything of any, I have questions, but I literally cannot. I got like 5 hours of questions, but I won't hold you for that long.
We could do like a part 2. Like Sarah comes back. What will she say next?
Yeah, we could definitely do a part 2. I will ask you this though. What do you think stops people in the IFB church from having that same type of encounter that you did? Like, as far as not knowing, understanding, like, it's not by works, but it's
Yeah.
by faith in Christ. It's by a relationship with Jesus, not from anything that you can do. And why do you think people stay in that for so long?
Man. I think like we are in Western culture, we are creatures of comfort. And if it is something we have always done and we've not been pushed out of our comfort zone and we've not been pushed to have conversations that are not combative with people who don't have the same thoughts as us, why would you? I mean, it's like if all you know is you put yourself together on a Sunday and you go sing 4 hymns and you listen to a sermon and you do communion once a quarter and like you tithe 10% regularly and you're doing all the things and then like everything is like very calm, like there's not a lot of waves because people who cause waves cause drama and drama is tension and who wants that? So I think
Yeah.
it's like a comfort zone thing and like not being pushed or even choosing to intentionally surround yourself with people who might not have the same thought processes or have the same life experience. Like at Grip, we all, there's like currently, it's a really diverse group of us, right? We all come from like very different backgrounds. Some of us have only been saved for a few years. Some have been saved for practically a lifetime, and it's generational. And I think, like it also maybe is losing sight of what the first church actually looked like, what the early church looked like of slaves and slave owners actually worshiping together, and like people who were of all different backgrounds coming together because of Jesus. And it, instead of this homogenized, safe, everybody looks this way, everybody does this is what we've always done, why do we need to change it?
Yeah, I think that's been the biggest hindrance in the church overall is division, is people not willing to get out of their comfort zones, right? Not being able to experience, what is the term they use for it? Like the Black experience or the white experience, like, little boys or little kids in the city, they're not in a rush to run to the suburbs because they're like, there's just a whole bunch of white people over there. We might go to an amusement park or something that they have out there, but like that's it. You know what I'm saying? And then you have suburban people that come to the city only for events, festivals, go to the beach, but they're not driving through Austin.
Right.
Right. The only time they pass in Austin is when they're on the 290 on their way to downtown.
Yeah.
So then they're like, oh, we're not getting off right there. And so these people never meet, they never mix. And if you only have a perception of a person of what you see on the news, and that's, all you think of is like, man, those little Black kids are terrible.
Right.
Or, those people in the city are crazy. And so the lack of coming together, the lack of people, community. And I always ask these questions, like if people are really reading their Bible, right? When you read the book of Revelation, I know people stay out of Revelation. It's like the scary book.
Yeah.
But Jesus said that it's going to be like a multitude of different people, all different shades and different colors, different races, different backgrounds in heaven. How is that going to happen if you're only sharing, the gospel with this person, or you only talk to these people and you don't know what the city life is like? I'm not saying you need to move to the city, but man, if you don't know anybody from the city, how much do you know about other people? You don't have any other friends that's outside of your own race, your own circle, then you're definitely limited in your experience, life experience.
Right.
And I've been blessed to grow up extremely different. I call myself, you can probably pronounce this word a lot better than me, an anomaly. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
That's what I consider myself, because I grew up in Logan Square, which is predominantly Hispanic, and then I moved to Austin 13 years old. And it was like this 15-minute drive, like I was in a whole nother city.
Yes.
Even though I had experienced on certain weekends and during some summer months, because my dad lived in Austin, but I was a little kid and I didn't go outside of like a 4-block radius. But to like live here, go to school here, to, all my friends are now here. And because I talked with like a Hispanic cadence to my talk, and I dressed and I was into certain things that they weren't accustomed to in Austin, like I was looked at as like an outcast. And I'm like, well, we all look alike. And then to go from Austin to go into the suburbs, it was like, here's another cultural dynamic shift. Like it's now all surrounded by white people. And I lived it was a very wealthy suburb that I lived in. And it's like, this is different. My stepsisters now, new people that I'm meeting, they're different. They talk different. They act different. They're into different things. And so, I went to Lakeview High School, which was probably at that time, one of the most diverse high schools in Chicago. We literally had every race, culture. We had Africans, Jamaicans, Asians, Filipinos, everybody. Literally everything. But you can still see the separation when you walk into the lunchroom. Blacks were over here, the Hispanics right here. You had the Mexicans, you had the Puerto Ricans, you had the Cubans. Everybody was thing. And so here's me, because now at that point in time, I'm like, I love people and learning about different cultures. And because I have an abundance of friends that all have different backgrounds, you see me, like I'm working the room. It's like this little black kid. He's working the room. I'm working the lunchroom. So I'm at this table with the blacks. I'm at this table with the Hispanics. I'm over this table with the whites. I got the Gothic group that I'm cool with. I got some Russians that don't really speak English. They're brand new here. I'm cool with them. Like I had an abundance of different friends and associates. And I thank God for that, because it's helped me in my perspective and understanding of people, and not limiting myself and putting myself in this box where I only hang out with these type of people. And I think that everybody needs that. It's something that I pride myself on exposing my children to, like, get some Hispanic friends, get some white friends. Like, you're just not going to be just around like people in Austin or people in Logan Square or wherever, right? And so they have a very unique growing experience as well, living in the city and how much we had to move. But I think we all need that. The amazing fact is that I can have you on this channel to be able to share your story that a lot of people might not know. Like I didn't know until we started talking about it at work, and I was like, "Oh, I think we need to talk about this, because I don't think that people fully understand on how closed off certain groups of people can be to the world."
Yeah.
And they think that their experience is this is the end all be all, even as we all call ourselves Christians. And so, man, I think that God he works in mysterious ways. He has a very good sense of humor. He brings people together. Because you probably never thought, like, in a million years that you would be on a podcast with this black guy that you met at work in Chicago.
But, fully God. So it's good.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so, with that, we're going to transition. I want you to talk about how you came to know about GRIP and why you chose to work or serve at GRIP.
Yeah. So you're gonna hate me. I only have like 6 minutes and then I have to hop on another call. So I will talk fast.
Okay.
So
got you.
Okay. In 2018, I had been visiting Chicago for random long weekends, and I never did anything touristy. I just, I had been introduced to the grittier side of Chicago through a friend who worked here in refugee resettlement. I learned how to cook Middle Eastern dishes, and I learned how to take public transit here while seeing the neighborhoods where her clients lived. And man, I fell in love with the sea of humanity that was here. And I was like, I just think that maybe at some point God might call me to Chicago. So I subscribed to the Gospel Coalition blog, and they interviewed someone on GRIP staff in 2018. And I had just been talking to God about whether or not there was like an inner city ministry for teens here that I could volunteer with when I came on like long weekends, or like if there's anything, like who was serving the teens here in the city. And so I read this blog post and I did a deep dive, read everybody's profile, like their bio on the website. And I decided to write a letter to Grip. And I was like, you don't know me from Adam. I live in Colorado. I read about your ministry and I'm praying for you. I didn't donate. I didn't ask them to respond. I sent it in the mail and I prayed for them, but I like never heard. And so that was that. And then God opened the door for me to move to Chicago in July of 2020 during the first shutdown of the pandemic. I taught preschool for the first 2 years that I lived here. And then God allowed my schedule to be a little bit more free last fall. And so I was able to become a mentor with Slam on Monday nights on the West Side, and had some really great girls. And it's like, man, like this organization is doing like such good work in the city. And then in March, I found out that the office administrator position was open, and I applied and I interviewed. They offered me the job in April, but were gracious enough to let me finish the school year so that my preschoolers didn't have to face a teacher change 7 weeks before the end of the year, because children and change do not always mix very well. So finished the school year, came on board with Grip July 7th, and 2 weeks prior, they had moved to a new office. And in the process, some of the Grip staff were cleaning out boxes of just like files and papers. And they found my letter, which my new boss had never read, had never seen, but whoever opened it and read it thought that it was worth keeping. So it was 2 weeks shy of 4 years to the day from the time I wrote the letter, said, I'm praying for you, you're doing good work, to my start date. So God is very much in the details.
Why haven't I heard this story?
I think you were not there when Sue made me tell the whole staff that on my first day.
Wow.
But I mean, like from 20, I get like super emotional, but like from when I was 21 and God showed me how much He loves people who don't have it all together, to now 15 years later being able to like have like a frontlines position, serving Jesus, loving Chicago youth, and like hopefully breathing hope into their futures. Man, I love how much He is in the details, because if you would have told me at 21 that this is what I would have been doing, I would have been like, that's crazy. And yet here we are. So it's good.
Man, oh man. Well, I'm super happy to know you. Your story is amazing. It's inspiring. And I want to make sure that, I'm a respecter of your time. So I appreciate you. Thank you for joining me. It's been like an hour and 45 minutes. So, man, God bless you. Thank you for everything that you do at Grip and making sure that the office is ran good and all those things. And so, I'll be seeing you around and we'll talk again soon. I'll have you on here for a part 2.
Okay.
But thank you again. You have a good night. All right.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Bye.